Hi friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in my sewing room and we are going to be making a table topper or a wall hanging, whichever you want to use it for. And I came up with this pattern because I was just finishing up a quilt that I had put together, and I still need to quilt it, and I had leftover fabric. But here is the quilt that I was putting together. And if you've been watching my Sew Sampler reveals, the one I just did for September, I shared this one, and you'll see more of it, I think, on that one. But it's using leaves, and I'm going to be making a wall hanging with these leaf blocks. So, in the same fabric, because I had leftovers, and I hate to waste my leftovers. And I thought this would be great to have to coordinate with it, since I'm going to be using that in my living room as a throw. I think I'm going to put a minky background on it, or backing on it, so it'll be really cuddly this fall and winter. So I came up with this pattern. Here is a drawing of it, and if you can see there's 4 leaf blocks, and I've put them together, and then I've added a flying geese border, and then I will quilt it and bind it. I've just colored it in with 2 colors just so that you can see which fabric is the print fabric and which fabric is the background fabric. But that is what my goal is when I finish this up. I have already started working on it, but I'll walk you through all the things that I've already done. And so far, I have my 4 leaf blocks, and I've got my 1 outside border, and I'm working on my flying geese border right now. But we're going to start with a leaf block, and that's where we'll start today. And you're going to be making 4 of them. And I will be giving you the cutting directions, the cutting amounts and stuff. I will not be writing out the pattern as far as how to do it. You'll have to just watch this tutorial, but I will write out the cutting directions and what you need to have cut. But you might also just want to go ahead and write it down as we go. I normally post recipes and things 2 days after on my Facebook, Blue Rooster Farm Facebook page. But when I put this out, I will also post on that page the cutting directions for this quilt, so you can go there and you'll have those cutting directions. But if you'd like to make it, stick around, okay? So we're going to start off with our leaf block, and you're going to need to make 4 of these. Here's one right here. Here's one. Here's one, and here's one. And they're all pointing to the corners, okay? The stems are all going to the middle. So we're going to do 1 block, and then you'll just make this 4 times. Now I'm just making a sample block. This isn't going to go into mine since I already have it. I'll probably turn this into a pot holder, or you could use it as a mug rug too. But let me give you the measurements for these pieces for our block. Now this block will be 12.5 inches unfinished. Okay, this first piece A, that is a 4.5 inch square, and you're going to need 3 of those. B is 1.5 inches by 7 inches. You'll need 1. C is 5-inch square, and you're going to need 2. Then for your background fabric, you're going to need 2 of the D's, and that is 4.5 inch squares. E, you will need 2. Whoops, I think I've got one of my D's over here. So your E, you're going to need 2, and that's a 5-inch square. Okay, so these are the only pieces you're going to need to make your leaf block. It's going to be really simple. What we're going to do is first of all, we are going to make, and I'm just going to pull this right here. So as you can see, this block is actually a 9 patch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 squares. And this is the other one. And you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 half square triangles. You're going to have 3 solid blocks. You're going to have 1 background solid. And then you're going to have this stem piece, which just requires a little bit of sewing, and it's not hard. We'll do this. So we're going to put all of these pieces together. The first thing we need to do is we need to make our half square triangles. So we're going to take, let's see what pieces we have here. We are going to take our 5-inch squares, and that would be piece C and piece E. And I'm going to slide these over. Okay. And we're going to put wrong or right sides together. Now on a solid, there is no right side, so that's nice. You don't have to worry about it being a certain direction. Now, if you have a white on white, there is a difference. You'll have to look at those really closely. So what we're doing is we're putting a print with a solid, and we're putting them right sides together. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to take a friction pin, and you can take a regular pencil or pen. This is just going to be in the seam allowance, and it's going to be cut on, so it won't be in the block. And I'm going to go from corner to corner, make sure that's right on the corner, and I am going to draw a line. Now, if you have your own way of doing half square triangles, by all means, just make it the way you normally make it. This is the way I do it. Now, you might also have the seam tape on your sewing table, which makes it really easy as well. But I'm just going to draw the line, and I'm going to set my machine so that I have a 1/4 inch from the edge of my foot here. If you have a 1/4 inch foot, then I would suggest you use that. So let me see if I can get you a little closer. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to set my machine. I use a scant 1/4 inch. It might just be a little bit smaller than a 1/4 inch. And that way, if I have to, I can trim it down a little bit. But it's a scant 1/4 inch. But you'll want to make sure you know where your 1/4 inch is on your machine. So from this line, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away on this side, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away on this side. Now, if you wanted to, you could draw, and this pin right here is what you would use, or this ruler would do it right here. You could draw the 1/4 inch line and just follow it. But my foot is in the right spot, so I can just do that. So I'm going to go right here to my machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain piece the 2 of them because it will go a lot quicker. So let me just start there. And when I say chain, that means just don't cut my threads. Just go to the next piece and do the same thing. And then what I do is I lift my presser foot, pull out a little extra string, and I just go to the next side, turn it around. And go straight to the next block. And my thread cutter is broken, so I'm just using a leader, a fabric leader. Trim your threads. Now, you've got this side and you've got this side. We're just going to cut directly on that line that we drew right there. And we're going to have 2 half square triangles. And you could use your rotary cutter for that too if you want. So there is a half square triangle. And there is a half square triangle. And I'm just pushing the seam toward the print. And I'm going to iron these 2 because I like to keep mine ironed. And I'll go ahead and cut this one and iron them all at the same time. If you have a seam presser like this, you could use that. But my iron is right here by my table, so it's very easy to use. But if you had this, you could just make sure your surface is a hard surface that you're doing it on, and you could press it like that. But I'm going to give it a good press. Okay, there are the 4 half square triangles. And now what I'm going to do is I am just going to trim off those dog ears. Now, if this were a smaller block, I might go and measure these just to make sure they are perfect. But this is big piecing, and so I'm not concerned if there's a little bit of extra edge or something on my half square triangle. It's a lot more forgiving when you're doing big blocks. All right, so now that we've got our half square triangles, let's move back over here. Now we're going to take our D piece, the 4.5 inch square, and we are going to go from corner to corner, and we're just going to cut it in half. Oops. So there we have 2 triangles now. Now we're going to take our B, our 7 inches by 1.5 inches. Yeah, 7 inch by 1.5 inch piece. And it's going to go right here to make the stem. So what we need to do is we need to fold and find the middle of our long edge of our triangle. And I'm just going to match my corners down here. And I'm going to give it a nice crease with my fingernail. So it's right there. The same thing with this one, a nice crease with my fingernail right in the center. And then press this one. We're going to give this one a crease right in the center too. And this one we're going to go all the way across. Okay, so that's where we're going to match it up at, right there. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to lay it right sides together with my triangle here. And I'm going to make sure the centers are right on top of each other. And I'm going to put a pin in it. And you can pin more if you want. I'm fine with just pinning right there, but if you need more pins, that is perfectly fine. So I'm just turning it over because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch stitch all the way across. So when we open it up, we've got that. Now we're going to take the center here and the center here. We're going to line those 2 up. Make sure I see that right. Scoot it down just a little bit. There There we go. We're going to put a pin right there. And we're going to do the same thing. We are going to stitch, and I like to have the background fabric on top, that way I can see and I don't get it folded under or something when I'm going under my presser foot. So starting here, go all the way down 1/4 of an inch. There you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold to press the seams toward the background fabric. And so I'll do that real quick. We have this right here, and now what we need to do is we need to make this a 4.5 inch block. So you need to get a ruler that's at least 4.5 inches wide. Now I have a 4.5 inch square ruler that I can just lay right here, and I can cut around it, but not everybody does, so I thought I'll just use this. So I'm just taking this one where it has the line going down here, and I am putting it right down the middle, just as good as well as I can. And again, this does not have to be perfect. The stems on leaves are not perfect, so this doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to have it as close as you can. So we're going to cut there and there. Now we have 2 straight lines, so we're just going to turn it all the way around, and the 2 untrimmed lines are right here and here. And now we have a line for 4.5. Line up your 4.5 here, your 4.5 here, and trim that. Okay, now you have your 4.5 inch stem block. Okay, now we've got all of our blocks ready. Let's put them down the way they should go. So we're going to have our stem here. We are going to have our A blocks. One, 2, 3, and then our half square triangles. 1, 2, 1, 2, and then our D block will go right there. Okay. So this is our block. So make sure when you put this together that it looks right. So we've got it laid out right. Okay, now that we've got it laid out right, it's easy to sew. So we're just going to start right here, and we're just going to take this one face down on top of the one next to it. And if you need to pin, you can. And we're just going to sew this seam right here. Okay, then we're not even going to cut that one out of our thread on that one. We're just going to leave it there. We're going to take this one face down on this one. Same thing here, flip it, so right there. Now we need to take these 2 pieces and join them with this one. So make sure you can see that. So we're going to take this, flip it over, and we're going to sew right down that edge. Let's just open these up. So now we have our 3 strips. Okay. And now we need to sew the strips together. So what I want to do is I want to go and press my seams one direction on one, this direction on row 2, and this direction on row 3. So when I say press them, that means we're just going to press all of these seams down like that. Okay, and then this one will be all of the seams down like this. And then this one's going to be the same as that. That way we can line them up when we stitch and they'll work out really nicely. So let me do that for us. Okay, I've got them all pressed. Now they're going to nest nicely. So I'm going to take the top row and I'm going to fold it like this down. And then I'm going to match up that seam and nest it right in there. So the seam on this side and the seam on this side should be directly on top of each other. And we're going to put a pin in it. Same thing with this one right here. This seam right here should be directly on top of this one, and we're going to put a pin in it. Now, if you ever have where your fabrics, where you have a little more fabric on one side than the other, like I do right here, I have this gap right here, and I think it's because of my half square triangle. Like I told you earlier, I did not trim it down and make sure that it was a good size. And I use a scant 1/4 inch. What I'm going to do is when I push this through the sewing machine, I am going to put the side that has the extra fabric down on my feed dogs, and that's going to take up all that extra without making it look different. So let's just go ahead and do that. All right, so you can see a little bit of gathering right here, but not much. Once I press it with a little bit of water or starch, it's going to disappear. So what I want to do with this seam, and I'll do that in a minute, is I'm going to open this seam because we have quite a few corners coming together on some of these areas. So when I press this, I will be pressing it open, and we'll do that whenever we get this other one on. So let's go ahead and get this one on first. So again, we're going to take our leaf and just lay it face down on the next row, match up our seams, and put a pin right and grab a pin here, right here, and a pin right here. And now let's press it and let's see if those little ripples go away. Okay. And when I press open, I have a little gadget that my husband made for me. I asked for him to make me one of these, and it's just a half circle rounded piece of wood, and then I've covered it in cloth. And when I lay my fabric on here, I am going to take, let's see if my iron reaches. Oh, it does. Okay. And I'm just going to take and I'm going to put my iron right on that seam. And what this does, it keeps me from pushing those other seams and getting them all messed up. It just lets me iron only that center seam, just like that. And then when I turn it over, I am going to give it a good press for the whole thing. I did notice this seam right here. It normally goes this way, or it normally goes this way. It accidentally, when I did that last one, flipped over. So I am going to take a pair of scissors and just take a little snip just in the seam, not on the seam, but just in the selvage there. And then it'll lay nicely. So I'll do the same thing here. And then I'm going to give it a good press over here. I just don't have a cloth here, so I need to do it on this ironing table. And there we have our leaf. Now you can take this and just trim it up to make sure you don't have any little threads sticking out. It should be 12.5 inches. If you need to trim off, if anything that you have to trim off, it's just going to be a teeny tiny sliver. This should measure 12.5 inches, and then you'll just need to make 3 more of these, okay? Let's take a look at what we have now. So we have 1 leaf block. So I'm just going to place it right here on here. So we need to make 1, 2, 3 more. And what you're going to do is when you get your 4 leaf blocks, you're going to sew these 2 together. Then you're going to sew these 2 together. And then you're going to take these 2 rows and sew them together, just like this. So you'll have all 4 put together. And it should at that point measure, let's see, I believe it is 24.5 by 24.5 when you have all 4 leaf blocks put together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut a piece of border out of our background fabric, and it's this piece right here, and we're going to cut that to be let's see here, I got it right here, 2.5 inches by 24.5 inches. So you're going to attach this to one side of your 4 leaf blocks, and then you're going to attach another one identical to it, 2.5 by 24.5, right here. Okay, so at that point what you will have is 2 edges, the opposite edges here, with a border. Then you're going to take a 2.5 inch strip by 28.5 inches. And you might want to measure to make sure yours is 28.5 inches across. If it's not, you can use whatever yours measures. Again, seam allowance may be a little different. It should be 28.5 inch if you're using a correct 1/4 inch foot, but sometimes we mess up and don't. But it should go right across from edge to edge, and you're going to attach that. All you're going to do is lay it down, and I even pieced together so I didn't waste as much fabric. Lay it down, sew it, then press it back. Do the same for the other opposite side, 28.5 by 2.5. Lay it down, sew it all the way down 1/4 inch, and then flip it back and iron. And so you should be at this point by then. And again, I'll have all of these pieces, the cutting directions, what you need to have cut in Facebook page on Blue Rooster Farm. So now what we need to do is we need to get our flying geese. And so I have been working on some flying geese, and this is what a flying goose looks like. It's a triangle inside of a rectangle, okay? And so I've been doing some just to get some made. And what we're going to do is we're going to be putting those on our quilt like this. And I am using, I believe, 8 different fabrics from my leftovers. You can just use whatever scraps you have. So I am just using scraps. You can do it all in one color, whatever you want to do. So those are going to go across like this. And you are going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe 6. Let me look at my pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're going to need 7. Once you have your 1/4 inch seam in here, you're going to need 7 on each side. And then you're going to have a 2.5 inch space on this side. Let's see if you can see that. All the way up here, and a 2.5 inch square all the way down here. So what I'm looking at right here is this. So here is a solid square on each corner that's 2.5 by 2.5, and then you have your 7 flying geese right there. 7 flying geese, 7 flying geese, 7 flying geese. You're going to need 28 flying geese all together. Okay. So if you are not familiar with making a flying goose or flying geese block, we're going to do some. There's lots and lots of ways. You can take a rectangular fabric and just put a square on it, go corner to corner, trim, and fold it back. That's fine. You can get, I believe, does Lori Holt have the flying geese papers? I think Fat Quarter Shop sells them. You can do all of that. But what I like to do is the 4 at a time flying geese. And you can find this little chart, and I'll put a link for it under Generations Quilt Patterns. And it shows you how to do 4 at a time. And this method right here, once you make your geese, you trim it down. She's got another, or he, I'm not sure who put these out. They have another sheet that has the exact measurement so you don't have any waste. I prefer to do the ones that are a little bit larger so I can trim them down, and that way I know my flying geese are very accurate. If you're really good at keeping your 1/4 inch and you don't want to have any trim off, you can use this one. I've shown the cut directions using the ones that you will trim down. So I will put links to both of these pages in the description box so that you can add these to your resources. So what you do is you find out this is going to need to be a 2.5 by 4.5 inch flying goose or flying geese block. And so you find it's going to be the unfinished 2.5 by 4.5 unfinished. And you find that, and it will be 2 inches by 4 inches finished. And it tells you for the goose square, cut 1 5.5 inch. For the sky squares, cut 3 1/4 inch. Okay, and then you're going to trim it up. It has the center so that if you don't have a special tool or anything, it's 2 1/4 inches to the center of your goose so that you can trim it down real easily following that. But what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's move this, show you how we do that. So I'm going to take my 5.5 inch background, and this is the goose. When you look at a flying geese block, the triangle is the goose, and then this is the sky. Think of a goose flying in the sky just like that. And so you've got the outer edges is the sky, this is the goose. So we're going to have the goose be the background fabric. Then we're going to take, and let me see which ones. I'll get some that are fairly light so that you can see the lines. And then you're going to take 4 fabrics that are 3 1/4 inch. Okay, so you'll need 4 of those. And again, if you're making it super scrappy, they can be all different colors. I want my geese to have the same color on both sides. I guess it didn't have to be. I just was doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and continue like I'm doing. So I'm going to take 4 fabrics that are the same. I'm going to take my friction pen and I am going to draw a diagonal line on all 4 of my sky blocks. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now I'm going to take my background piece and I've got it face up. I'm going to put my sky pieces face down, one in the corner right there and then one in the opposite corner, and they are overlapping. Okay, this line should still be straight. You should have that line going straight across. I'm going to put some pins in. Okay, I'm going to just use a little bit finer pins here so that they're not in my way. And I like to have them over in the corners of my sky so it doesn't get in the way of my presser foot when I sew. And just line them up the best you can. Just like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take and sew 1/4 of an inch on both sides of this drawn line. If you need to, you can draw 1/4 of an inch line on both sides and just follow the line. I can do it with my presser foot. So let's do that. Okay, you can see it on this side. I have 2 lines parallel to each other, 1/4 inch away from that center diagonal. On this one, here's my center diagonal. You can't see the stitches, I don't think. They're awfully light. Take my pins out. And with my scissors, I'm just going to cut on that line that we drew. And you could also use your rotary cutter. Okay, and so what we have, I just fold back the print fabric. Looks like a cat head or something. So we have that right now. I'm going to give these a press and then we'll do one more thing to these to make them flying geese. Okay, there they are pressed. Now we have our other 2 print fabrics, our skies, and my line is going right here. So I am going to make that line go from this corner right up between our 2 cat ears. But you want to make sure you are lined up perfectly down here. Okay, so we're going to pin again away from that stitch line so that we don't get it with our presser foot. There we go. And do the same thing with this one. Our line is there. Okay, so there's what we have. Now I'm going to take my sewing machine and I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch on both sides of that line again. And I'm just going to take both of them and chain piece it and do both of them at the same time. can see the stitch lines there on both sides, but you can see it, I think, here. Okay, so what we're going to do is take our scissors and we're going to cut right directly on that line again. So we just cut them in half like that. Same with this one. Whoops. Okay, so same with this one. We just cut it in half. Now we're going to flip back our print side, do a little finger press, and there we've got a flying geese block. Now these are not measured to 2.5 by 4.5 yet because we made them bigger. Now if you used the other sheet and you cut them, the measurements on this one, you would be finished and you would have the right size. If you are a really accurate sewer, do that and you should be great. Again, when I'm making a bunch of these and I'm going pretty fast, sometimes I'm not that accurate. What I do is chain piece all of them, all of my fabrics at once. So I'll have a whole long string of flying geese and just do them all at once. But right now I'm just doing the 4 from this one fabric. Okay, so as you can see, these are not perfect by any means. You've got something here. See, this is what I mean. Mine would probably have this on it. And so we need to trim them down. Now you can use a ruler or a regular ruler, and you know that you're trimming them down to 4.5 by 2.5. In the sheet that I had, it said 2.5 inches is the center. So you would know, I'm just using a regular ruler. You would know that 2.5 inches right here was going to be your center. So what you would do is you would line up your 2.5 inches and you would try to make, let's see if we can do it this way maybe. So 2.5 inches on this side. Now let me see what the center was on that. Nope, it's 2.25 inches is the center, so we got to do 2.25 inches. So we'll find 2.25 inches. That is our center. So here's 2.25, and I just put it at the peak of that triangle there. So we're going to cut it right here on this edge. Okay, so I get that one edge done first. Then I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to go 2.5 inches. Here's my point here. 2.25 inches, I'm sorry. 2.25. And actually, I've got this line right here, which makes it a little easier. I think that's going to, nope, it's not going to line up. Just be a hair off. Oh, there it goes. Okay, there's 2.25 inches there. And we've got both ends. So this should now be 4.5 inches. Okay, so that's from there to there's 4.5 inches. Now we have to get this the right width. So I know I need 1/4 inch over that point for seam allowance. So I am just going to line up this edge here and this edge. This is going to be at 4.5. Make sure those are lined up. Then I'm going to find my 1/4 inch. And my 1/4 inch line is right here. And I'm putting it at the peak right there. And I'm going to trim it. And then I'm going to flip it around. Now I'm going to put it at my 2.5 inch line here, all the way to the edge here. Should be at the 4.5 inch here. and anything that's hanging out here is going to be trimmed off. So there you now have a 2.5 by 4.5 inch flying geese block. Okay, now I have a tool, and this is called the wing clipper, and it is from studio180design.net, and I love this one. So once I get it to this, it goes from 1.5 inch width flying geese to 10.5 inch width flying geese. And it goes, the thickness is from 5.5 all the way down to 1. So I'm going to need to make this a 4.5 by 2.5. I've got my corners up here for the points. So I'm going to lay my point right there. Here is my 4.5 line, and here, so I know this is the edge I need to trim off. I can check down here to make sure that I have my corners meeting just fine, and I just follow this edge right here on my triangle. There's a line right there, and I just line it right on top of my triangle that I have there. And then I look it over, make sure it looks good. There. Okay, whoops, I bumped it. And I lay it on there, and I cut here, and I cut here, and see the waste you get off of that? They make them somewhat bigger. Some of them are going to have more waste than others. Then we're going to flip it upside down, and this time we're going to use the lines right here to put the triangle right into that line. And here's my 4.5 inch edge. I've got it lined up with the edge of my block. Just match that right in there. Make sure my 2.5 inch line is right on the fabric, and trim. And there we have our block. That was a lot easier. So there we have 2 of them. I will do another with this one and just show you how quickly it works. Line it up, trim it. You've got a lot of seams right there. Turn it over, line it up right there. Make sure everything looks good. I think I need a new blade. Okay, there's one there. We'll do a measured one again, and I'll just do it like I would be doing it if I were making it. So I need to go 2 1/4. And this one doesn't have a straight line on the quarters, so that makes it a little hard to see where it's lined up at. And then 2 1/4 to there. Let me find a spot that has the 2 1/4. There it is right there. Turn it this way. So I need my point to be 1/4 inch for seam allowance. I can use these lines here to make sure I'm square. And then make sure it is 2.5 inches wide. There we go. So however you like to make your flying geese, there's more than this this amount of ways to make them, but I do feel like 4 at a time with this ruler is my favorite. So now we've got some flying geese made. What we're going to do is we are going to finish making all the flying geese, and then we're going to sew strips of them together. So I'll bring you back when I've got all of my flying geese made. We are back, and it is the next day. I finished up last night my flying geese, and I got them all trimmed up. Yep. I separated them into 4 piles so that each pile had 7 different flying geese. And I also went and found some scrap fabric from this fabric that I had left over and cut 4 different 2.5-inch squares. These are going to be the corners. So I'm just going to go ahead and just get an assortment of the fabric that I've been using and use those for the corners. And I went ahead and did 2 sides just to get ahead. And I just put 7 flying geese blocks together into 2 strips. I still have 2 strips left, and all of these are going to have 7 flying geese. So let me go ahead, and I mixed up the fabric as I went. I didn't want them to look the same. You can decide how you want it to look, but this is just the way I did it. So what you're going to do to sew the flying geese into strips is you're going to take 2 of your flying geese, and you're going to put right sides together, and then you're going to sew along the edge 1/4 inch. And you're going to keep doing that. And I just went row by row. So I am just going to set this row aside and just focus on 1 row. So then I'm going to take 2 more, put them together, sew 1/4 inch, 2 more, and I think this would be a really pretty 2-color quilt with just the design in it. I think that would be really pretty. You wouldn't notice that they were leaves in the middle. It would all blend together. And let's see, 2, 4, 6, and I've got 8 here, so I'm going to just set one of those aside. And then I'm going to take, since I have been chain piecing them, I'm going to take the next, or the last, or the first one that I did, and just add it to this flying geese block. Then I'm going to take the 2 that are at the end here, and I'm going to sew those 2 together. So I just open them each up like that. Decide how I want to sew them together. We'll do it like that. And then I'm going to take, we're down to 2 pieces. We have a 3-piece and a 4-piece. And we're just going to put these together. Just make sure all of your triangles are going in the same direction. Unless you want to design your own pattern, which you can do that too. Sometimes that's how we figure out new designs, is we accidentally turn a block the wrong way and we kind of like what we came up with. So I sure do miss my thread cutter. Okay, so make sure all my triangles are going in the right direction, and they are. Now when you press this, I just press one direction or the other. It does not matter which. If you want to press open your seams, you definitely can, but I just press to one side. So that's going to be pressed to one side, and I'm going to go ahead and do another one here real quickly. There we go. We've got our last strip made. And before I press these last two, I'm going to go ahead and add the corners, these 2.5-inch squares, to the ends. So I am just going to put, let's just add, we're going to add this one here. So we're just going to add it like that. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch away. And then on the other end of it, we're going to do another one. And we will sew 1/4 inch away. And I'm putting the square fabric at the bottom because there's no seams. It will be easier so I don't have to worry about accidentally turning a seam the wrong direction when I'm sewing over it. Okay, and then we're going to do the same to this strip. So we're going to have 2 strips that have corner squares, the 2.5-inch squares on each end. The other 2 are just made up of 7 flying geese blocks. There they are, and I'm just going to go and press them all in one direction. Just press the seams in one direction. Okay, I'll be right back. They are all pressed. We have all of our pieces ready to assemble, and I think I'm just going to bring this out and just kind of go over what we're doing now. So we have our 4 quilt blocks, the leaf pattern put together. We have the borders all added. And now it's time to add our last border, the flying geese border. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 2 short ones, the ones that do not have the corner block on the end, and those are going to be the first ones we put on. So we're going to have those. Let's just put one on this end and one on this end. And when we're putting that on there, we need to look at, I'm going to move this now. Okay, so when we're looking at this, when I put the background border on, this is the side I put it on first because you can tell that this piece was added last. So we need to start with this side again. That will just make it look nicer. And if you didn't start on that side, it won't be the end of it. And actually with this one, because of the corner blocks, you're not going to be able to notice. But usually when you put a border on, you go in the same order. You always do the same side first. So if we did this side first on this border, the next border you put on, you'd start on this side, and then you do the other sides last. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece, and it should go just perfectly across, and it does. If you've continued to make your seam allowance the correct one, now we need to make sure we put it the correct way, and I have it designed so that the arrows of the geese, or the geese, fly outward. Now, if you wanted to change it, if you liked this better, you do whatever you want. This is the way I designed it, and this is the way I'll do it. Now, I always find the center, so I can fold this in half. And remember, these have been pressed. Everything has been pressed. You want to keep things pressed. That way it's easier to use. And I'm going to put a finger press right there so I can see where the middle is. And then I know this is going to be the middle right here, but I will just show you. It's the center of where those two leaf blocks met. And that's, if you didn't have something like that, you could just fold it together. So there's my center here, and then here's my center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to match centers first, just like that, and put a pin in it. And you can see that my point of my flying geese rectangle right here goes right to that seam. That's nicely lined up. Then I'm going to go over here and I am going to match the ends up and put a pin in the end. Now, if this were a really long quilt, you would add more pins, but I might add one more just to show you. You don't have to pin it if you're good at putting these borders on without a lot of pins and just keeping it together so that it doesn't start pulling the bottom and not allowing you to have the same amount of fabric on the top and the bottom. So when I do this, I notice that I don't have any gaps between the fabrics. That means I've measured correctly and my seam allowance is good. And so I'm not going to have to worry about trying to gather up some of that fabric in a feed dog. And if I want to, I can just go ahead, since I've got this, I just hold it like that, pinch those together, put another pin in it here just to be safe, and then do the same thing, hold it top, or the edge, outer edge, and the middle, pinch it together. It looks like it's all the same, and then just put my finger right there and make sure it's slid down to the matching the edge, and grab a pin. I have so many different kinds of pins in my pin cushions. I have fine ones, I have long ones, so I need to kind of sort those, but you know, if I sort them, then they'll just get mixed up again. All right, so this is ready to sew together. If I were sewing with the plain fabric on top, I noticed all of my seams are going in the direction that I'm sewing, and so there's very little chance that they're going to get flipped. So I think I'm just going to sew that way. I think it'll be a little quicker. So I'm going to sew like this. And I will press, and on this one I'm going to press toward the background this way because there's no seams this way and it'll lay flat. So I'll be pressing this direction. But before I press it, I'm going to go ahead and do the other end. Okay, that's finished. Looks like we've got it all going the right direction, thank goodness. Okay, I'm going to press again. I'm going to press so that the seam is pressed toward this border that is the background border right here. So we're going to press this way. Okay, we got both ends sewn on. Now it's time to work on the sides. So we want to put the piece that goes over here. And this time we're using the pieces that have our 2.5-inch square. And so when we line this up, we're going to have to match up seams on our 2.5-inch square where it connects with our flying geese block, and the border seam right here. So we're going to need to match that up on this side and on the other side, plus match the middle. So we're going to match a few more things up on these. So remember, we fold it in half, crease it, and we know that this is going to be the halfway mark, but we'll fold it in half just to ensure that. Match everything up. And I think you can see, just use my fingernail to crease. Okay, and remember, we're going to lay it so we know it's going the right direction. The geese are going out. So let's match our center first. Flip it over, put a pin in it. Then let's match our seam. Our seams right here, make sure they nest. And if they don't nest, it's okay. This one right here is going to nest. I don't think the other one, oh yeah, it might. If we're lucky, they nest. If not, you can either repress so that they nest, and I might do that so that the bulk is not as thick. So I'm matching up that seam right there. And when I say I'll repress, that means I'll just do that one seam, so it'll go that one direction. And then I want to match up my very edges. And there we go. Then while I'm on this end, since it's a longer strip this time, I'm checking to see. It looks like both the top and the bottom are fine. So I'm going to put a pin right here. And remember, if you did have one piece of fabric that was larger, either the top or the bottom, put the larger piece toward your feed dogs, and that will take out that little bit of extra fabric. We're going to move it up like this, and we're going to see if we can match up these. So this one right here, this seam is going this way, and this seam is going the same way. So I'm just going to finger press this so that it goes the other way. That way I can nest those two seams and it will lie flatter. And it won't be so much bulk in there, especially when you go to sew over it or long arm quilt it. Otherwise you're going to have a pretty big bump there. So we will pin and get one more pin. And match the corner ends. Then we're going to check to make sure we have no excess fabric on the top or the bottom, and it looks like we're good. I'll put a pin right there. Oops. And we are ready to sew. So this time most of my seams are going this direction, and so I'm going to again flip it over, and I'm going to sew on the top because that way they'll run nice and smooth. I do have a seam where I pieced this border, and that way I can kind of watch this one when I go over it. If your seams do turn while you are sewing, It's not the end of the world. You can snip the fabric that's going the wrong direction, just don't snip into your seam. Okay, we've got one on. Let's get the other one. And there we go. So I'm going to press toward the background on these, and then I'll bring you right back. Here's our finished quilt top. It turned out really nice. My plan is to go ahead and long arm quilt it. I will probably use like a pantograph of leaves. I think I have one that will look really nice. If you don't have a long arm, this can easily be quilted on a regular sewing machine. You can do straight line quilting. You can do stitch in the ditch. You can do free motion if you have a free motion foot, but those are completely doable because this is not a very big quilt top. I will be bringing you back and finishing up this tutorial and showing you how I make a scrappy binding with the leftover pieces from this quilt. And then I will also be sharing with you how to machine bind this quilt. So if you want to learn either of those methods or you want to see how I do it, come back in about, probably a few days. I'll be putting that next video out, and we'll continue. Right now, just a reminder, you can get the cutting directions for this in the description box below. I'll also have it posted on my Facebook page, Blue Rooster Farm. So you can either download the PDF version here, or you can see the picture of it and just print that picture on Blue Rooster Farm Facebook page. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like this content, let me know so I'll know whether or not to continue doing more sewing tutorials. I really enjoy sewing and quilting and sharing my patterns and knowledge with others. If I have the viewers that are interested, I'd be glad to make more. Also, if you will subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. Liking and sharing also helps my channel immensely. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment box below. I really appreciate you watching this video. I hope you have a great week.